Good evening, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Dark and Disturbed Tales. I'm your host, Steve Taylor. Tonight's episode is coming to you live from Outpost 7, deep in TFM territory. When we last saw our protagonist, Alex, and his companion, Cheeto, they were dealing with unwanted visitors. Now, we find them facing starvation or relocation, and it's time to make a decision. When you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, which way do you go? That's the question in tonight's episode of Dark and Disturbed Tales. So without further ado, I present to you The Day After Yesterday, Chapter 6, Paying the Toll, written by Leon Hamilton. Narrated by the Nightwatcher and Zachary Shaw, aka Zac-Eerie. Starring the Ghost of 94, CREEPYFACE, Jesse Cornett, and Olivia Steele.
The last few weeks had been getting harder than usual. The food was gone, the weather was horrible, and things were only getting worse. Alex had a decision to make. After going over the maps a half a dozen times, he'd come to the conclusion he'd have to go west to find food. New territories meant new gangs, and he'd heard all about the people out west. A while back, he'd been trading with a nomad named Jill. She told him about the area and who to avoid, but right now, none of that mattered. Very few people had ever returned from the west, but the ones that made it back had massive amounts of food for trade. No matter how he cut it, there was no way to make this an easy trip. In one direction, he'd been crossing Mangler territory, and that was going to be a problem. The Manglers were a gang known for being extraordinarily vicious when it came to trespassers. Their territory was along the western border and was marked by headless corpses impaled on spikes. If they managed to get past them, they'd have to cross Skinner territory. The Skinners are a step away from being feral man-eaters. They communicate through grunts and hand gestures, but they're organized and run in big packs. The other option was to avoid both territories and go through the valley, but that would take them into TFM land. Thanks to the information he'd gotten from different travelers, he knew the Manglers' weaknesses: drugs. Most, if not all of them, were willing to give safe passage in exchange for dope, and that meant Alex needed to talk with the nomads. Finding nomads wasn't easy. By nature, they stayed on the move. But some of the older ones had taken to running trade outposts. The problem was, he didn't have anything to barter, but he planned on crossing that bridge when he got to it. The closest outpost was on the south side of the city. It was a long walk, but most of the way was clear. It was scorched earth. A black desert. Nothing but miles of ash and trash. In the early days, the fires had leveled the area. It lit up the night sky for weeks. From what he heard, the fires had something to do with the natural gas, but he couldn't remember the whole story. It really didn't matter. Crossing the Black Desert wasn't going to be fun, but it was doable. After filling a few jugs with water and packing his gear, Alex and Cheeto headed south to the outpost. The first part of the trip was the worst part. They'd have to navigate through a few neighborhoods, then cross the highway just to get started. On the upside, there were a lot of places to scavenge along the way. With any luck, they'd find food or something to trade. To his surprise, the first couple of hours were going great. He'd run into a pair of wanderers and filled one of their canteens in exchange for a can of Spam, 1 tin of sardines, and a piece of hardtack. After splitting the Spam with Cheeto, Alex felt better. The boost of energy got them through the first neighborhood and into the second before they stopped to do some scavenging. This was their last chance to find something before crossing the highway, and he wanted to make the best of it. This part of town was mostly apartments, condos, and lofts, mixed in with strip malls and shopping centers. The area had been hit pretty hard, but the parts of it that were still standing looked promising. Avoiding the high-rises, they searched the storefronts. Their first couple of stops didn't pay off. All they found were a couple of egg timers and one of those tiny screwdriver sets. Now, they were standing outside of an old Walmart, and he was debating going in. He'd hated this store before the world went nuts, and he doubted it had gotten any better. All of the doors had been fortified, but judging by the huge holes in the walls, it hadn't mattered. Staring into the darkness of the building, Alex checked his rifle and glanced down at Cheeto.
I don't know. What do you think? Should we do this?
Wagging her tail, Cheeto barked once, then took off running to the store. Shaking his head and taking one last look around, Alex thumbed off the safety on his rifle, then went inside. As he passed through the hole in the wall, the first thing he noticed was the smell. A musky, wet funk hung in the air, mixing with the faint stink of decay. Most of the building had been converted into living spaces. They used shelves to build walls separating some of the camps. Remains of old tents and fire barrels were scattered everywhere else. By the look of it, there had been a lot of people living in here. It didn't take long to find bodies. Most of them were just bones, but at least 2 of them had died within the last month. Like the rest of the place, they'd been picked clean. There was no point in searching them. After half an hour of searching, the sound of Cheeto barking at something gave Alex a little hope. Moving quietly, he cut through the store, tracking her barks, till he found her in the storeroom, scratching at a closed office door. Tapping his leg to call her back, he shushed her, then stood listening for a moment. After a few seconds, he heard something fall inside the office. Moving to the left of the door, and taking cover behind the set of overturned lockers, Alex took aim at the door and then shouted.
We don't want any problems. We didn't know anyone was here. We're gonna leave now. If you don't shoot at us, we won't shoot at you. Deal?
There was a long moment of silence. Then an old-sounding voice called back.
Bullshit. You think I'm stupid? You're gonna pretend to leave. Then when I open the door, you're gonna shoot me.
Stay in or come out. I don't give a shit. We're leaving. Come on, Cheeto, let's go.
With that, the two of them headed out, but Alex made sure to keep an eye on that door till they were out of the storeroom. As they crossed the store, the old man came out of hiding and snuck up to the doorway. He watched Alex playing with Cheeto for a second, then called out.
Does that thing bite?
Startled by the sound of the old guy's voice, Alex snapped into action, taking cover behind an old barrel. Seeing his reaction, the old man ducked back behind the door frame.
Easy, son. I just don't want to get bit. I'm gonna step out. I'd appreciate you not shooting me when I do.
Easing his finger off the trigger, Alex stayed put and waited for him to make his move. Sticking his hands out first, the old man slowly stepped out. He was short and thin, with a scruffy gray beard and long hair that he had slicked back, revealing his weathered face.
The name's Earl Buckley. And you are?
None of your business. What do you want, Earl?
Wine, women, and a view of Niagara Falls, but I'll settle for some water if you have to spare.
To spare, no. To trade, maybe. You got anything worth trading?
Earl smiled, and he nodded, as if he'd been waiting for someone to ask him that question.
Do I? Welcome to Buckley's Bargain Bin. If I ain't got it, I can get it. And if I can't get it, then you don't need it. Step into my office. Let's make a deal.
With a comical flourish of his hands, Earl motioned the two of them back into the storeroom. Glancing over at Cheeto, Alex shook his head, then stood up. He didn't really want to kill the old guy, but if this was a trap, he was gonna blow his damn head off. Cautiously making his way to the storeroom, he peered into the office and frowned. Earl had lined the walls of the office with shelves that were packed with a wide assortment of useless junk. Computer monitors, cell phones, bags of fake hair, and shoes that had clearly come off the dead. This was just trash. Alex hoped he had more to offer.
No offense, but I don't need any of this. Gonna have to pass. Sorry, old-timer. No deal.
Alright then. What is it you're looking for? I might be able to scrounge something up.
I'm headed to the Magnolia outpost. I need something to trade.
Slitting his eyes and stepping back, Earl scratched at his beard.
Magnolia. Funny you should say that. I've been meaning to get out that way. If you're crossing the void, you're gonna need a guide. For one bottle of water, I'll show you the fastest, safest way through, and I'll throw in an item of your choosing so it's fair.
Yeah, I don't think so. I've crossed the void before. I think we'll be okay. Thanks, but no thanks.
Earl scoffed, picked up a compass, and tossed it to Alex.
The Black Desert ain't what it used to be. There's folks living in that mess, and they ain't the friendly type. They've been abusing travelers and killing them. Word is they're man-eaters, outcasts from one of the tribes up in the mountains. You should be careful out there, and make sure you don't step out in the open. That compass is worth a pretty penny to the nomads. It should get you what you're after. Now, about that water.
After a brief negotiation, Alex filled one small bottle with clear water and headed out. The compass alone was worth the price, but Earl told him about the shortcut was a bonus. Getting to the highway took a little longer than expected due to the fact that someone had blocked the old path. After rerouting and climbing over a few burnt-out cars, Alex and Cheeto found themselves staring out at the Black Desert. For the most part, it was all flattened, aside from several massive craters left by the explosions that started the fires. Each crater had flocks of vultures circling them. There had to be hundreds. In the distance, smoke snaked up into the sky, reminding Alex that there were people out there. According to Earl's instructions, there was an old sewer access tunnel that would take them more than halfway through the void, as he called it. The exit was supposed to let out behind what was left of the old stadium, which would leave a little under 5 miles to cover. Finding the entrance took close to an hour. It was located 2 miles in under what was left of an overpass. The trip had been easygoing, but now that they were staring into the tunnel, Alex was having second thoughts. Taking a moment to look around, he sighed and looked over at Cheeto, who was picking out a spot to take a leak. He looked away while she handled her business, and when she was done, he shook his head and started walking away from the tunnel.
Fuck that. We're better off up here. Let's go.
Cheeto wagged her tail and followed along as they strolled through the burnt, black wasteland. The smell of scorched wood and burnt rubber still clung to every inch of the place. It was amazing to see what was left of the banks and grocery stores. But when they came to their first crater, it was breathtaking. Standing on the edge, staring down into the hole, was like looking into a nightmare. It was filled with bones and rotting corpses. There was something about seeing that many bodies in one place that got to him. He'd seen death. Hell, he'd killed more people than he cared to remember. But this was different. He couldn't imagine the type of mind it would take to do something like this. Trying his best to get the image out of his head, Alex pressed on, and the miles slid by. After a few hours of walking, he and Cheeto stopped to rest in the remains of an old Starbucks. Oddly enough, the place still faintly smelled like coffee. It was a pleasant change. As usual, he split a can of his sardines with Cheeto while they sat in the shade eating. They had just finished up and were about to head out when Cheeto started growling. Grabbing his rifle and scanning the area, Alex waited for her to make a move. Whatever direction she went, he would follow. It didn't take long. Snarling, Cheeto took off like a guided missile. Doing his best to keep the sight of her, Alex moved through the rubble, following at a safe distance. As she rounded a corner ahead of him, a familiar voice shouted out,
There it is!
Just before a shot rang out. It was Earl, and he wasn't alone. A second voice yelped,
Get it off me!
as the sound of Cheeto snarling and tearing into him filled the air. Bringing his rifle up as he made the corner, Alex immediately opened fire, dropping Earl while the second guy struggled with Cheeto. She had the guy by the balls, literally. She was locked in and shaking her head like they were a chew toy. Since he wasn't a threat at the moment, Alex rushed over to Earl, put 2 more shots in him before turning his attention to the unlucky bastard on the ground.
Ooh. That looks like it hurts. What are you doing here? Please, man! Ah, oh, shit! Okay. It was Earl's idea. He wanted the dog. For what? Oh, God! Please, dude! Get this thing off me!
Taking aim, Alex called Cheeto to his side, then put his finger on the trigger.
For what? We were gonna eat it. We ain't like the others. They take both of you. All we wanted was the mud.
Nodding his understanding, Alex tensed up, but didn't fire. Instead, he gave the order.
Get him.
Cheeto reacted by charging in at full speed and going to work. To his credit, the guy tried to defend himself. He lost 3 fingers and a part of his face for the effort. In the end, she ripped out his throat and ate her fill before Alex called her off. Between the 2 of them, they'd been carrying a revolver with 4 shots, an old .22 hunting rifle with 8 rounds, and 2 decent knives, and a canteen half full of dirty water. It wasn't a bad haul. The guns and knives would be great for trading with the nomads. On top of that, Earl had been wearing an almost new pair of steel-toe work boots. Those weren't for trade. Alex had been needing some new shoes, and these were a perfect fit. They were heavy and would take some getting used to, but having a steel toe would be worth the adjustment. Once they were rested, Alex and Cheeto hit the road. By nightfall, they'd made it nearly halfway through the void, and it was time to make camp. After searching for nearly an hour, they found the remains of an old gas station and settled in for the night. The place was surprisingly intact, considering the tanks had been blown, and most of the area was destroyed. Since they were only camping for the night, they didn't need a fire. Plus, the building would shield them from the wind and cold. That night felt longer than normal. There were times Alex could have sworn they were being watched, but nothing happened. When the sun finally came up, it was a relief. They traveled all morning, passing massive craters and burnt-out buildings, till they reached the first living tree they had seen since entering the void. Seeing this huge tree with its lush green leaves surrounded by so much destruction was astounding. There were shrines of candles and rocks set up all around it, along with an old box truck. On what was left of one side, someone had spray painted the word salvation sloppily with white letters. Alex stood staring at it all while Cheeto roamed around sniffing everything. He didn't really get the reason for it till he walked over to the tree. When standing next to it, he could see what was on the other side. It was the end of the void. The world still looked like shit, but there was life out there. Green grass, old buildings being overgrown by nature. It was a stark contrast from the void and the apartments he'd been living in. It sort of reminded him of the forest for a second. A little excited by the prospect of not being in the void, Alex used his binoculars to look for the magnolia. It took a while to spot it, but once he had a direction, they were off. Cutting through the parks and the old zoo brought back memories of the old world and how things used to be. But the nostalgia didn't last long. They had reached the stadium and were cutting through a lot when Cheeto alerted them to something. She snarled and got low as a lone figure walked out into the road ahead of them, then called out,
"This is nomad territory. What are you doing here?"
A little confused by the statement, Alex calmed Cheeto, then yelled back,
Nomads don't claim territory.
Well, I do now. This is the new Republic of Magnolia. What brings you here?
Not wanting to cross the nomads, Alex tried to keep calm.
Trade. I'm looking for a woman named Jill.
There was a long moment of silence. Then the stranger held up his hands and came walking over. Once he was close enough to get a good look at Alex and Cheeto, he nodded.
She's over at Trail's End, running the games. Is that a wild dog? I don't think I've ever seen one up close. How'd you get it to do that?
I didn't. It's just how she is. What's Trail's End? How do I get there?
Still staring at Cheeto, the guy aimlessly pointed back over his shoulder.
Yeah. Go about 8 blocks that way and turn left at the Clown. It's at the end of the road. That's freaking amazing. I can't believe you got one of these. If she ever has pups, let me know. I'll make you a good deal for one.
Nodding, Alex walked off with Cheeto at his side. As they got further away, he noticed the guy was still staring at Cheeto.
What's your name?
Nathan. And I'm serious, man. I can get you almost anything. Just let me know. I gotta get one of those.
Yeah, okay, Nate. So you said turn at the Clown. What does that mean? What clown?
There's a clown with red hair and a yellow suit on the corner. You can't miss it. Turn there and go to the end of the road. It ain't rocket science.
Following his instructions, Alex walked and walked till he finally saw the clown. Nate must not have been able to count because it was 12 blocks, but there it was. It was an old Ronald McDonald statue. Clearly, it wasn't supposed to be there, but someone had gone through the trouble to use it as a landmark. The end of the road wasn't as close as it sounded. The walk took a little over an hour, and when he finally got there, the place was empty. Exhausted and irritated and hungry, Alex sat on the curb and looked around. Trail's End was a gated community that was surrounded by a brick wall. The entrance was blocked off by a stack of shipping containers that had a tent set up on top. It was an odd setup, but he figured it must have something to do with the games Nate mentioned. Hours came and went, till finally, just before midday, a horse-drawn wagon came rolling up. Sitting in the driver's seat was Jill. Jill was an older lady with bright green eyes and sunburned skin that was highlighted by her shiny bald head and larger-than-life personality. With a big, toothy smile, she looked down at Alex, who was lying on the sidewalk at this point.
When Nate told me some guy with a wild dog was looking for me, I thought he was drunk. But I'll be damned if he was telling the truth. Looks like I owe him a beer. Jesus, kid, how in the hell did you end up with one of those? And what do you want for it?
She ain't for sale. I've got some guns and ammo with a couple of blades. I need to trade them for some skag. I'm going west for a while. I hear there's big game out that way, and I'm tired of starving.
Jill smirked and took a deep breath.
There's big game out there, all right, but you ain't bagging it with that pea shooter you're toting around. If you're going west, you're gonna need some high-caliber gear to bag a big one. Besides, if you're thinking of trading skag with the manglers, you're wasting your time. They'll take what you've got, then rape and kill you. They've been running that scam for years. Can't believe people still fall for it. You're better off taking Smuggler's Run. You'll have to go through TFM territory, but it's better than dealing with manglers and skinners.
The TFM, or the First Men, are a gang of lunatics that believe they're the direct descendants of Adam, the First Men. Their leader is a freak named Harlow. He claims to receive orders from a mountain. There are around 50 of them, not including Harlow's personal guard that he calls the Knights. They don't allow anyone to pass through their territory without paying a toll. The toll is always some insane amount that no one could afford. When the toll can't be paid, the travelers go into debt with the TFM. That means they own you till the debt is paid, and no one ever repays the debt. Smuggler's Run was a route that the nomads created to cut through the TFM territory without being caught. What made the run so special was the fact that the nomads changed it every few weeks. The only way to know which trail was active was to have a nomad as a guide. The only other option was dealing with the manglers and the skinners. Technically, getting past the manglers wasn't that complicated. The gang was made up of junkies and degenerate douchebags that spent the majority of their time getting high and fighting with each other. The real issue was the skinners. No one had ever made it past them, and if they did, they never came back to talk about it. For the most part, Their skinners were a myth. The only real thing anyone knew about them was they wore human skins. That's where the name came from. Of course, there were stories. Some people said they were giants. Others said they're cavemen. But in the end, no one really knew for sure. The truth was, Alex didn't care about any of it. If it came down to dealing with one group instead of two, he would take one any day of the week. Getting up and stretching, he looked at the shipping containers and shrugged.
We both know I'm not paying you to take me through the run. So what do I have to do to get the map?
Jill smirked, then shook her head.
Cheapskate. All right then, let's make this interesting. There's a house in the center of that neighborhood. In the basement of that house, there's something I want. If you can get it for me and make it back to the wall, I'll outfit you and give you one of the old routes. Catch is, if you don't make it, or if you can't get the item, I get the dog.
No deal. How about this? You outfit me and give me a map with a current route, and when Cheeto has a litter, I'll give you first pick.
Jill scoffed, then frowned.
Do I have stupid written on my forehead? First off, if you go west, you might not come back. Second, she might not ever have puppies. That leaves me with nothing, and I don't like that. So, here's my counteroffer to your counteroffer. You go in, get the item, and bring it to me. In return, I'll upgrade your gear and give you a map if you tell me how you trained her.
Pretending to think it over, Alex kept a straight face, then nodded, and agreed to her terms. What she didn't know was he had trained Cheeto. Most of the time he followed her more than she followed him. The relationship was built on mutual trust, not training. With an agreement reached, Alex helped Jill get set up for the day, and once a crowd gathered, she started the show. Jill took bets on how long Alex and Cheeto would survive and if they'd make it back with the item. The item in question was a journal that was supposed to contain the location of a massive government bunker. The catch was there was a small population of feral man-eaters living in the neighborhood. All bets collected, the crowd selected 2 reps to go up to the observation tent on the top of the shipping containers. Their job was to watch Alex and Cheeto attempt to complete the challenge and report what they saw to the crowd. Once the reps were in place, Jill escorted Alex and Cheeto to the entrance. The way into Trail's End was through a door that had cut into the wall of one of the trailers that blocked the main gate. Before Jill unlocked the door to let them in, Alex paused and looked back at the crowd.
What's stopping you from doing this yourself?
Laughing at the question and unlocking the door, Jill shrugged and opened it.
Go find out. If you get to the house and make it to the basement, you're looking for a big green journal. It's in a brown backpack on one of the corpses down there. Between us, I hope you make it. I really want to know how you trained that dog. I'll hold on to the rest of your gear till you get back. Oh, if you happen to see a chrome 45 with a wood grip, grab it. I'll throw in something extra for the effort.
Shaking his head, then checking his weapon, Alex gave Cheeto a nod, and the 2 of them entered Trail's End. As the door shut and locked behind them, Alex took a look around. The neighborhood was surprisingly in good condition. Of course, there were sections that had been destroyed, but there were a lot of homes still standing. Ahead of them to the right, there was an old playground with a fenced-in pool and tennis court. Everything was overgrown and falling apart, but he could imagine how nice it used to be. On the left side of the road, there was what was left of an old water tower. The supports had been taken out, and the tank was lying partially embedded in the ground. By the looks of it, something or someone had been living there. It was hard to tell if it was before or after the damage, but Alex made note of it anyway. Fighting the urge to start scavenging, he moved on. There were cars and trucks blocking the road leading into the rest of the neighborhood. All of them were rusted out heaps, but bullet holes were still visible on most of them. It looked like there had been some sort of war. This had probably been someone's last stand, and it hadn't ended well. After navigating through the first few blocks, Cheeto caught wind of something. Normally Alex would follow her lead, but he wanted to get this over with, so he kept the lead. Despite being on guard, Cheeto stayed close as the two of them hurried through the streets. The closer they got to the center of the neighborhood, the more they became aware something was watching them. It wasn't long before hoots, howls, and high-pitched screeches echoed all around them. Naked, filthy figures scrambled through the brush and popped up in windows, stalking them every step of the way. Gone up and moving slowly, Alex wondered how long it would be before they attacked. So far they'd been curious, but none of them seemed aggressive. However, all of that changed when they reached the private road leading to the house they were looking for. As soon as they started down the road, all hell broke loose. The ferals were hiding in overgrown landscapes that ran along both sides of the path, but they couldn't see them. Their hoots and howls became grunts and animalistic screaming just before rocks and spears came flying out of the darkness. Doing everything they could to dodge the barrage, Alex and Cheeto ran for their lives. Ahead of them, the road was so overgrown they could barely see the house, but they had to keep going. After narrowly avoiding a rock to the head, Alex ducked a low-hanging tree branch and tripped over something in the road. Stumbling forward to keep his balance, he managed to stay upright and caught the sight of movement to his left. There were ferals running along them in the brush. There were at least 4 of them, and they were all covered in a combination of mud and leaves. Their camouflage made them nearly invisible. If they hadn't been running, he wouldn't have seen them. As fast as they were, none of them were keeping up with Cheeto. She was so far ahead of Alex, he was having trouble keeping eyes on her. They didn't stand a chance. With the house getting closer by the second, Alex could see where the brush stopped and the driveway started. The land in front of the house had been cleared and leveled, then covered in rocks, creating a courtyard. When Cheeto raced into the courtyard, the ferals that were closest to her turned back, and the one flanking Alex were starting to pull back as well. He didn't know why they were retreating, but he was happy to see it. By the time he made it to the clearing, the last of the ferals were disappearing back into the brush. Taking a moment to gather himself and call Cheeto to him, Alex looked at the house. Most of it was rubble, but there was still a section standing. The surviving part of the house was in decent shape. The walls had held up, and most of the roof was intact. Guessing this had to be the way into the basement, he made his way over and found a way inside. This part of the house had been the kitchen and living quarters for the staff. Obviously, anything of value had been taken a long time ago, yet there were still signs of someone or something recently being there. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. With the exception of one of the countertops, it had been cleared, and there were several sets of footprints on the floor around it. While Alex was busy looking around, Cheeto had gone off on her own. Almost as soon as they'd gotten inside, she'd picked up a fresh scent and taken off after it. He wasn't worried. Cheeto could take care of herself, and if there was a problem, she'd let him know by barking. Going by the tracks, there had been 3 people. All of the prints led to the same hall Cheeto had gone down, but only one set led back out. Thinking back, he remembered Jill saying the brown backpack was on one of the corpses down there. The only way he would have known that was if she'd been down there herself. That last set of footprints had to be hers. Whatever happened down there had forced her to leave the journal and her people behind. Taking one last look around the kitchen, he hurried off to catch up with Cheeto. The hallway led to the staff living quarters. It was wider than normal, and the floor was made of smooth concrete. Halfway down the corridor, there was a walk-in freezer on the left. Its door had been removed, revealing a shrine made of human and animal bones. In the center of the freezer, there was an old shopping cart with the remains of a body in it. The basket had been tipped up in a way that put the body on display, and the bones had been piled around it, acting as support and decoration. On the wall outside of the freezer, there were 7 sets of old bloody handprints. Everything about it felt wrong, but Alex wasn't about to waste another second on it. Moving on, he made his way to the end of the hall and found himself at an intersection. To his right, he could hear Cheeto scratching at something, but couldn't see her. There were open doors on both sides of the hall, with a bathroom at the far end. On his left, the hall was partially blocked by a section of collapsed ceiling. It was open enough to pass through, but he really couldn't see what was down there. Turning his attention back to Cheeto, he went from room to room until he found her. She was digging at an old, overturned wardrobe that was blocking off a closet. It took a few tries to get her to stop, and when she did, he heard the familiar sounds of a raccoon growling. As hungry as he was, there was no way he was passing up a shot at a free meal. After dispatching the raccoon and putting it in his backpack, the two of them together moved on. There was no access to the basement through the living quarters, so once they checked it thoroughly, they moved on to the other hall. It took a lot of maneuvering and crawling under or over debris to finally come to an area Alex could stand in. The ceiling in this part of the house was still intact, causing it to be pitch black, but Alex was prepared. Before the world fell apart, he'd been an avid collector of Zippo lighters. Over time, he'd either traded or lost all but 2. He kept one in his backpack and the other in his pocket. The fluid was hard to come by, so he used them sparingly, mainly for starting fires, but today it would be a torch, till he found something better. Pulling it out and flipping it open, he ran his thumb across the flint wheel and smiled as the flame came to life. The glow of his lighter gave him just enough visibility to find something to use as a torch. After a quick search through some of the rubble he just crawled through, he found the leg of an old end table. Using one of the knives he'd taken off of the 2 idiots that tried to rob him, he cut the sleeve off his shirt and then used it to make the head of the torch. It took a couple of adjustments, but once he got it, the search was on. Cheeto had been sniffing around in the dark. Something must have gotten her attention because she had taken off long before the torch was lit. Cautiously moving through the corridor, he passed a walk-in pantry and caught the faint smell of rotting bodies. That must have been what set Cheeto off on the hunt. Picking up his pace, Alex hurried to catch up. As reached the end of the hall, Cheeto barked and got excited. That happy feeling didn't last long. There was a turn at the end of the hall on his right, and as soon as he made it, he stopped. There was an old open doorway leading to a set of stairs that disappeared down into the basement. The smell was strong here. This was it. He couldn't help but wonder what stopped them from getting out with the journal as he made his way down. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, the size of the basement came as a surprise. It was massive. He was standing in a big open room that had another hall on the far left side of it. There were rows of empty metal shelves and stacks of old wooden pallets all around the room in different sections. The place looked like a warehouse. Light from the torch gave him a decent view. He couldn't see everything, but since he wasn't searching the place, it was good enough. Sound of Cheeto barking directed him to the hall where he found her sniffing around a corpse. There was no backpack and no Chrome 45, but there was a rifle lying a few feet away from the body. Picking it up and inspecting it, Alex nodded. It was an AR-15. There was dust on it, but it was in decent shape. If he could get it out of there, he was planning on keeping it. The body was so rotted he wasn't going to risk touching it if he didn't have to. After strapping the extra rifle to his pack and putting it back on, the two of them continued their search. The hall split up into two more sections. The first was a set of rooms that looked a lot like a big prison cell. All of them had heavy metal doors with feeding slots and small viewing windows. At the far end of the corridor there was one more room that must have served as the control booth. Inside there were controls for the locks along with broken monitor screens built into one of its walls. Whatever this place had been, Alex was ready to leave. Second section, where they had hid the dirt, there was only one room at the end of the hall, and it was through a huge set of wooden double doors. The doors were very heavy and engraved with a giant image of an owl's head that split when the doors opened. Inside were rows of bench seats arranged around a stage with a big statue of an owl-headed man on it. There, in one of the aisles, was a corpse wearing a brown backpack and clutching a Chrome 45 in his dead, rotting hand. Aside from the smell of death, there was something else in the air Cheeto didn't like. The odor bothered her so much that she wouldn't enter the room. Moving quickly, Alex rushed over to the body to retrieve the gun and the bag. Going for the pistol first, he grabbed it and winced at the feeling of maggots squirming in his hand as he pulled the gun free. Setting the pistol aside, he set his mind on the bag. Rather than trying to get the entire thing, he opened it and found the green journal exactly where it was supposed to be. Pulling it out and holding it up, he shouted to Cheeto.
You big baby. This was too easy. Wait till I tell.
His words were cut short by two things: Cheeto barking and footsteps racing up behind him. Turned around in time to see a figure charging towards him. Everything happened so fast he barely had time to get out of the way. Dodging to avoid the figure, Alex saw what it was for the first time. It was a man, pale and thin, with long matted hair. He was naked and scrambling around on all fours. It wasn't until the wild man stood up that Alex realized exactly how big this guy was. He stood nearly 7 feet and was horribly thin. Every bone in his body seemed to almost poke through his filthy, pale skin. Letting out an animalistic crawl, the tall man lurched forward, launching his attack. He swiped his long arms, hoping to grab Alex, but he was too quick. Still clutching the journal, Alex dipped under the man's spindly arms and made a run for the door. Dropping back to all fours, the wild man gave chase, scrambling over the benches and jumping to take swipes at Alex. Smell or no smell, Cheeto wasn't going to stand by and watch Alex be attacked. Barking and launching into action, she raced in. At the moment the wild man saw her, he stopped. Alex was too busy running to notice, but when he reached the door and looked back, he saw the standoff. The wild man hissed and snarled at Cheeto, which gave Alex the time he needed to drop the book and grab his rifle. Two of them danced around in circles for a second, making it hard for Alex to get a clean shot. The wild man would swipe at Cheeto, and she would either bite him or try. But when she finally got a hold of one of his arms, he howled and stood to shake her off. That was the moment Alex needed. He took aim and put 3 rounds through the center of his chest. As the bullets punched through him, the sound of screaming filled the room. The flickering light of the torch illuminated more wild men clawing their way out of a hole in the wall on the far side of the room. Frantically calling Cheeto back to him, Alex fired off a few more rounds as she raced to his side. Once she was out of the room, he grabbed the journal and stuffed it down the front of his pants, then closed the door, engulfing them both in darkness. Moving through the corridor, he did his best to focus on Cheeto. With no light to guide him, he had to rely on her, but the screams of the wild men were making it hard to concentrate. Struggling to keep calm, Alex stopped, then dug in his pocket and pulled out his lighter. As soon as he got it lit, he regretted it. A blur of pale skin and filth slammed into him, knocking him off his feet. The impact knocked the lighter out of his hand, but it managed to stay lit as they tussled on the ground. The wild man raked his nails across Alex's face, tearing skin and drawing blood, then a headbutt nearly knocking him unconscious. His backpack was making it hard to maneuver. Dazed, he managed to block another incoming strike and grab the wild man by the throat. Being on his back put him at a disadvantage, but he was able to push the wild man off him and scramble to his feet. That short moment of separation gave Alex enough time to pull the knife from his belt before he was under attack. As soon as he made contact, Cheeto came flying in and jumped into the fight. The distraction of her biting into his calf was all it took. Alex drove his knife into the wild man's neck and twisted the blade, blood gushing from the hole in his neck. He gasped, gurgled, then lost his balance because Cheeto was tugging at his leg. When he hit the ground, she went straight for the throat and finished him off. Putting the knife away, Alex gathered himself before picking up the lighter and his rifle, then got moving. Screams of more wild men echoed around them as him and Cheeto made their way to the warehouse part of the basement. They just stepped out of the hallway when a third attacker came rushing up behind them. Cheeto reacted first by charging in, giving Alex the time to put the lighter down and ready his rifle. Aiming center mass, he pulled the trigger and put 2 rounds through the back of him, dropping him on the spot. Unfortunately, the rounds didn't kill him. He screamed and flopped around till Alex came over and shot him in the head. Exhausted, Alex took a deep breath while listening to the sound of more wild men screaming in the darkness. He wondered how many of them there were, but for now he'd settle on getting out alive. He would kill 2 more of them before finally making it back to the kitchen. It wasn't till that moment that he realized he'd left Jill's .45 lie on the floor when he'd gotten the journal. Laughing to himself, he pulled the journal out of his pants and put it in his pack before heading out. The trip back to the gate was going to be different this time around. Now that he knew what to expect, Alex wasn't taking any chances. Checking his rifle, then giving Cheeto a nod, 2 of them set off down the road leading out. Rather than run the whole way, he chose to move slow and steady with his gun. As soon as the first stone was thrown, he fired in the direction it came from. He didn't expect to hit anything, but when he heard the scream, it almost made him smile. The rush of that moment set the tone. Every time he caught movement or spotted one of them, he fired. 1 round at a time, he put down several more on the way out. Once they'd made it off the road and into the neighborhood, the 2 of them ran the rest of the way back to the main gate. As they approached the entrance, one of the spotters on the top of the wall called out, "Incoming! Open the gate!" As they opened, the 2 of them raced through the sound of the crowd cheering. The first chance they had, Alex found a place to sit down for a second. Since Cheeto was sitting next to him, almost no one approached him, but more than a few passed and waved. After a few minutes, Jill came walking up carrying a gallon jug of clean water. Keeping an eye on Cheeto, she asked.
Is it gonna attack me?
Alex smirked.
Maybe. But if that's water for us, I think she'll give you a pass.
Handing the jug over, she finally turned her attention to him.
Please tell me you got the book. By the look of it, you had a tough time in there.
Yeah, I got it. I had your gun too, but I forgot to pick it up. the hell was that? I've never seen people like that. What's wrong with them?
No clue. Place was walled up when we got here. Personally, I think those are the people that live there. When the world tapped out, they walled themselves in and eventually went nuts. That's my best guess. I could be wrong. Now, about that journal. Let's see it.
Reaching over and pulling the journal from his pack, he paused before handing it to her.
Why are you doing this? What's in the journal?
Taking a moment to consider her answer, Jill looked at him, then sucked her teeth and nodded to herself.
A new life. A life with running water and electricity. A life with an honest-to-God hot shower. Can you imagine that? I'm talking about a self-sustaining bunker the size of a small town, and it's just sitting there empty, waiting to be had. That's what's in that journal. Now hand it over.
Passing it to her, Alex shook his head.
That's crazy. There's no way that's true. Even if there is a bunker, there's no chance it's empty. Besides that, how do you know about this? Who told you it was down there?
No one told me. We found it in our town. Me and a couple of guys went in to scavenge the place when we got attacked. We had to run and we ended up at that house. We thought we could hide out in there till the people outside gave up. We didn't know those things were down there. They didn't attack till we were on the way out. George, the guy you got it off of, he found it in that weird church room with the statue. He was gonna wait and read it, but since we were stuck for a while, I took a look at it. I only got through the first few pages before we had to go. From what I read, the guy the journal belonged to had come from the bunker. There was an accident. Some sort of gas killed everyone, but he managed to get him and his family out in time. The gas was supposed to dissipate and they were going to go back, but they never got a chance.
Next, you're gonna tell me this guy left a hand-drawn map and instructions. Come on. You can't tell me you're buying into this.
No, smartass. There's no map. But there is this.
Flipping to the last page of the journal, she plucked out an ID card.
Mount Weather, Virginia. I know exactly where I'm going. Question is, do you want to ride along? I know you're planning on going west for food, so I'll make you a deal. I'll go with you so you can use my wagon for whatever you bag. Plus, I'll help out. If you come with me to Virginia. It's a long haul and I'm gonna need the help. My crew died at Trail's End. You can even get the first pick of places to stay once we get there. You can't get much better than that. So what do you say?
After thinking about it for a second, Alex nodded, then extended a hand to shake on it. The two talked over the details, and after 2 days of rest, they hit the road.
Sometimes we have to go through hell just to get a little slice of heaven. Be careful out there in the wastelands, folks. The roads are full of bandits and bad men. May your knife stay sharp and your shots hit the mark. Safe travels, listener. It's almost time for me to go, listener. I hope you will join us next time for another episode of Dark and Disturbed Tales. I am your host, Steve Taylor, coming to you live from Outpost 7. Until next time, may the darkness embrace you.